Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Nancy Lee and Perry R. Bass Performance Hall. The hall is relatively young. It opened in May of 1998. So it was built new. It's not a refurbished hall. It was built from scratch on this downtown city block here in Fort Worth. It took 35 months to build. The hall has some real interesting history to it relative to how it was financed. It's a public place, but it's entirely financed with private funding. There's no public funding in Bass Performance Hall. It was all funded by donations from over 6,000 individuals, foundations, and corporations that gave money for the hall. Fundraising was very successful. The goal when they started fundraising in 1994 was to raise $60 million. And they actually raised $73 million to build the hall itself. The hall didn't cost that much money. We spent roughly $70 million. So there was some funding left over, which has gone to support the children's education programs that we produce here in the hall through the school year, Monday through Friday in the mornings. The architect for the hall is David Schwartz. David Schwartz has offices in Washington, D.C., and has done a tremendous amount of work in the Fort Worth, Dallas area. Not only Bass Hall, but also other venues like the American Airlines Arena in Dallas, Cook's Children's Hospital here in Fort Worth, Sundance West Apartments, Tarrant County Courthouse additions, and those sorts of things. So David Schwartz is your architect. Lindbeck Construction Company, a local construction company, actually built the hall. We a lot of times have people say, why is it named after Nancy Lee and Perry R. Bass? Two very good reasons for that. This downtown city block was owned by Nancy Lee and Perry R. Bass, and they basically gave it away to a nonprofit corporation called Performing Arts Fort Worth that owns and operates the hall. They also gave $10 million to help build and maintain the hall. So for those two very good reasons, Bass Performance Hall carries their name. Plus the fact that the Bass family itself has been very, very prominent in the revitalization of Fort Worth downtown. A lot of the rejuvenation you see in the Sundance Square area is really due to the impetus provided by the Bass family and what they have done for the Fort Worth area. In their ability to involve the rest of the community in these projects. We're in the East Portal right now, and I'll point out the fact that back in the 1860s, Fort Worth was laid out in a grid network, the downtown grid network, and each block of downtown is exactly 1 acre in dimension. So we sit on exactly 1 acre of land surrounded by 4 busy streets: Calhoun, 4th, Commerce, and 5th Street. As a result of that, we have that footprint, a 1 acre footprint. So we, as a hall, tend to go below and higher. We tend to go vertically. So we go 3 stories below the ground. We go 10 stories above the ground. And we sit on this 1 acre block. So since we are confined that way, David Schwartz, the architect, decided to build 2 major entranceways to the hall. I'm standing in the East Portal. We have the mirror image of entranceway over in the West Portal. The artwork is what really distinguishes the East Portal from the West Portal. All the paintings in the hall were done by twin brothers from Fort Worth, Scott and Stuart Gentling. Not the Gatling brothers, but the Gentling brothers. And they did the art directly onto the surfaces of the ceilings here, like in the West Portal, in the high dome, which is about 80 feet above your head. They worked from platforms, just like Michelangelo did the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican in Rome. So the art is done directly on the surfaces themselves. And in the East Portal, where we are now, you'll see we have the morning sky. So the East Portal, we have the sunrise sky. And I'll just mention the West Portal is obviously going to be the afternoon sky, the sunset sky. But this is a morning sky in the East Portal. And the vine that is painted, the plant that's painted around the portal, the dome itself, is a Texas red bay laurel leaf. The theme of this portal in the minds of the Gentling brothers was the Greek god Apollo. Apollo, who is the god of the sun, he's the god of prose and poetry and harmony and logic, the nice quiet things of the world, man's nature, the quiet man's nature. So this was the quiet side of the house. The west side is the wild side. We'll talk about that later when we go over there. But this is the quiet side of the house. The Greek god Apollo is the theme. And the Texas red bay laurel leaf ties into that because Apollo had an earthling girlfriend and he got mad at her and he turned, Daphne was her name, he turned Daphne into a laurel tree to punish her. And every spring, when she would put out her leaves, he would strip the leaves off the branches of the tree and he'd weave them into the victor's crowns that the Greeks used to crown the winners of their Olympic Games. And you'll see that being crowned by the laurel leaf, feathery type motif, you'll see that in other places in the hall also. So this is your Apollo side, your quiet side. It does relate to what we do here in the hall because it relates to the type of music that we do. This is a quiet side. This is your Barber, Debussy type of the hall, the side. Those sorts of composers, the quiet guys. The wild guys reside in the west.